Every person has a story. And you know what? So does every piece of furniture. Come along with me today, and I'll tell you a furniture fable. Hi everyone, I'm Andy. Welcome to Furniture Fables. When I saw this little mid-century neo-classical style dresser listed for just $35 over on the marketplace, I sat up and decided to take a second look. First of all, she didn't look to be in too terrible of shape, and second, I caught a glimpse of something in one of the included photos that was potentially interesting on the back of the dresser. I decided to go ahead and purchase it, and when John and I got it home and reassembled it, I took a look at the back and yes, my hunch had been correct. This was a Dixie dresser, probably from the 1960s. Now, I don't mean to oversell this point too much. It just means that this was most likely a well-made dresser, and Dixie is a respected and known brand, which of course is always a plus for a furniture fabler. There really wasn't anything terribly wrong with the dresser other than the expected scuffs and scratches of a piece this age. And it's certainly not terrible looking, but these neoclassical styled pieces with their black speckled finishes, faux keyholes, saggy, dramatic handles, and kind of drippy details, for lack of another way of describing them, are just not in demand currently, stylistically speaking. And so, preparing my plan to transport this well-made workhorse into the 21st century, I began. I started, of course, with a good clean. Looks like my simple green could use a little refill. Using a brush and a rag, I gave the piece a good scrubbing and also a good inspection, and then I rinsed it with some clear water. I removed all of that old hardware, including those faux keyhole covers. You know, with a piece like this, my thinking is usually that I can go in either one of two ways. I can lean into these fancy pants details and do something maybe very feminine or even fantastical, or I can attempt a make under, so to speak, and see if the dresser can become something a little bit more sleek, modern, and neutral, a piece that could really be useful for a lot of different folks. The first option could be a lot of fun, but I decided on the second, as I decided it might give this quality piece its best shot at a new gig. I put the piece on its back and I gave it a good vacuum. And then I got out the Bondo because I had old hardware holes to fill. You can see how the original holes are not centered, right? They're a little bit high to allow for that droop of those fancy handles. I taped the back of those holes and then I filled in each of them. And then, okay, folks, look away if you love these little feet details, these grapes, as I began to think of them. I filled in the grapey legs. the dangling grapes. They're not working for me. They're not working for me. I don't know. They're like the drooping grapes. Okay, we'll leave it at that. After the Bondo dried, I sanded it smooth using a foam abrasive pad so that I could kind of sculpt it. And wasn't surprised to see some divots. This is very typical when you do a larger fill. So I mixed up some more Bondo and just kind of dabbed it over the top of those spots. Then I began my scuff sand in preparation for painting. I used a 180 grit paper to rough up the surface a bit and also to smooth down any little tiny scratches that I came across. I also used that grit to give some roughness to that very shiny, very slick laminate top. I sanded back the fills on the drawer holes and then I scuff sanded each of them as well. After John and I had our huge struggle to get the drawers in their right spots on this piece, I actually went back later and discovered that they are in fact numbered.
Were they like that before?
I don't remember. It usually seems to me that drawers are numbered this way, vertically, as opposed to horizontally, like how you might read, right? So instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it more typically will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The way you can tell, of course, is that there are only 2 of these smaller drawers, and when you take them out and look at them, this one says 1 and this one says 4. So, makes sense. You can see I've got a couple of drawers with some fit issues. This one here is the most kind of out of place. It's hitting over here on the side. And this one is okay, but it's just a little bit tight. I've investigated the slides. They all seem really solid and they seem centered. It could be that there was just a little bit of expansion that has happened over time. So I'll probably just fix it with honestly a little bit of sanding of that little spot there. Checking out the drawers and seeing how they fit. It's kind of a good time to do that because now is when you're dusty, your shop is dusty, the piece is dusty. You might as well do all the dusty work at once, and then you can move forward knowing that the drawers are going to work and fit. Yes, you gotta love a well-functioning drawer. Taking the time to really make sure the drawers are working well is so important with older pieces. No one wants a dresser with sticky drawers. Even though I was planning on using a shellac-based primer, I decided to go ahead and sand the sides and the tops of all of the drawer fronts, even the ones that were fitting well at this point, because I knew that this would be kind of like a good insurance policy in terms of fit, since I would of course be adding primer and at least 2 coats of paint, kind of like we're making a little extra space. I also refreshed the sides, even though they were in great shape, just so that they would condition extra well at the end. Okay, it is very common with mitered corners like these to see cracks where they are joined. And in a wood finish like this, your eye doesn't really notice them. But once it gets painted, those cracks are going to become really, really obvious. So I used some painter's caulk to fill those in. Okay, time to wipe up all the dust and get this piece primed. I mixed up my Beige shellac-based primer really well, and then I used a roller to hit all of the flat surfaces and a little chip brush to get into the inset details. Then I did a second coat, but this time I used my spray can of that same shellac primer on all of those little details. This is a great use of a spray version of the primer. Primer is expensive, and it's extra expensive in its spray can form, so using it strategically here is a smart way to go. I sanded the primer with a 220 grit paper and then discovered, oops, I managed to miss the little pinholes from the drooper thingies. So I quickly added a little bit more filler, sanded that back, and reprimed. About this time, I noticed more mitered cracks. I kind of thought I might. They were hard to see in that dark, really, really textured faux finish on the piece. So I went around and I filled each of those cracks with some more of that painter's caulk, and then I found some more cracks. This is a really typical place on a dresser to see a tiny bit of separation between the leg frame and a side panel. And again, in a painted finish, your eye will see it. So I added that painter's caulk and then wiped it back with a damp paper towel. These little details can feel like they aren't worth the effort, but in the end, they will make a huge difference in the overall appearance of your work. Okay, I decided to go all in on the neutral idea and chose this color from Fusion Mineral Paint called Plaster. It's a very warm cream shade. I strained it and added a little bit of water and then tested out my spray settings on a cardboard box to make sure that the flow and the pressure was where I wanted them, and then I gave the piece its first coat. After everything dried, I did my second coat, and then after that dried, okay, I've got the dresser up on a workbench that I actually recently bought used because I'm thinking of doing some upgrades to the workshop area. You could use a little zhuzhing, a little refresh. I'm excited for that. As you saw, I did not apply the paint to the feet or this lower bar. That's because I had something else in mind. One look that has kind of trended in recent months and maybe a couple of years has been for dressers to have a separate wood frame base. As you know, on the sides of the dresser, there's no base piece, right? Those panels just go straight down. There's no horizontal bar on the sides currently. So what I'm going to be doing is actually adding something there. But then you might be wondering, but how am I going to create that wood look here? Because we have a mix of things going on right now. There was that faux finish over some kind of solid wood. But we also had, I noticed these little detail plinths, little toppers right here. They were actually a different species. So if I had attempted to stain the actual existing wood here, that would have been quite challenging to achieve a balanced look. But of course, on top of that, we have wood filler because I chose to cover up the grapes here, the grape details, the dangling grape details on the legs. So I have these big Bondo fills right in here. What am I gonna do? This whole piece was covered in its day's version of a faux wood finish. It had an all over stain and it had that black speckled effect, right? That was a look that people liked back then, not so much now. So I'm gonna use a product to create a faux wood finish over this. Even though we've got some solid wood elements here, I can unify the base, which I think is gonna give us a nice framed out look, which has been kind of a popular look as of late. And I think will give the dresser a little more oomph. It'll kind of give it a little more of a modern refresh. Are you ready? Yeah, let's base it up. It's all about that base, friends. So I had some of these hobby boards left over, and yesterday John came out and he trimmed it down for me, so it's the same width as this bar here, you can see. And then I just cut down a couple of them so they would fit nicely right in there. But I think the thing to do is to go ahead and do this faux finish over the top before I put it in place. I sanded my little faux sidebars with a 220 grit paper and then added 2 coats of this primer by Retique It. This is a product that specializes in helping you create different faux wood effects. This primer has actual wood fibers in it, and so the tones are really realistic. I added 2 coats of the primer to the dresser's feet and that lower bar as well. And then once all of that dried, I got out the gel stain. The one I'm using is dark walnut, I believe, and I gave it a really good stir, and then I applied it to my first sidebar. So the instructions for the gel stain say to let it sit for no more than 60 seconds and then wipe it back with a rag. I decided to play with it a little bit and essentially use my chip brush as my rag and use that dragging motion to create a subtle lined texture as I removed the excess stain and kind of blotted my chip brush off as I worked. After I did one of the back legs, I held up the bar next to it and decided, yes, yeah, I was on the right track. You can see as I work on the foot here that, again, I'm using that rag to blot my chip brush. That was really important to get that excess stain off, but letting the very irregular bristles of the chip brush really soften the texture as they dragged through the stain. Then I added that same gel stain to that horizontal lower bar and the foot plinths and blended all of that out with my brush. Okay, finally time to add those bars to the dresser. I glued them on with some Titebond wood glue and then gave them a little bit of extra security with 2 small nails. Quick little paint touch-up. And time to finish off the drawers. I added a bit more of the plaster shade to the tops, and then I gave the drawers and the body of the dresser a light sanding with a fine grit pad. And then I got out some polyurethane by Minwax in a satin sheen. Again, in my efforts to save a little bit of money, I did my first coat with a brush. And then I gave everything another light sanding just to get off any little bits of dust or anything that had raised up any texture before finishing off with the spray can version, which of course helped me to get into the nooks and crannies of all of that trim work. I chose a creamy neutral floral paper to line the drawers. Gave the sides and the drawer slides a good conditioning with some scented wax. My favorite part, putting the handles on. I'm just gonna do some quick air math. Yes, it's completely clear now. They're going to be perfectly centered. Math. Stay in school, folks. I think, yeah, there we go. Yes! Okay, I can do this. I can do it. And in the end, we got the drawers back in together, just like at the beginning.
Full circle.
You want to shut it with me?
Yeah.
Here, 1, 2, 3. Yay!
Beautiful.
Yay!
Is it officially done, this piece?
Okay. Do you remember this scratched, speckled, drippy, and droopy, and dated dresser? Well, here she is now. Smoothed and simplified, our once fancy friend looks ready to get back to work. So how much did my modern make under cost me? Well, the dresser itself was $35. I spent another $35 on primer and paint. I used about $15 worth of my Retique It kit, another $10 for liner paper. The handles of destiny, John! It's like a modern farmhouse or something, or I don't know. Oh, that's not it. It's something. My hardware cost $40, and I'll say another $20 on cleaner, rags, sanding paper, wax, brushes, etc., bringing my total out-of-pocket cost to $155. So what might I list it for? Well, typically a higher quality 6-drawer dresser with a recognizable name can go anywhere in the $600 to $700 range in my area. This one will be a bit of an experiment for me. I'm very curious to see how this color does. This plaster, it's really pretty in person. Are you gonna get any love? I don't know. This will be an experiment. It'll be interesting to see. So what did you think? Are you a fan of the make under? Or should I have gone fanciful? Were you glad to see the grapes of wrath recede? Or are you feeling sour about it? And what about plaster? I hope you enjoyed today's fable. If so, please make sure to give me a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe because you are not going to want to miss next week. I'm going to take a piece from last year that I did last year that has not sold, and I am going to give it the most strategic makeover from top to bottom and see if I can't get it sold. See if I can't. We got to get some traction. Poor little guy. This poor little guy. Poor little dude. Got to help him out. I will let you know in that fable what happens with it, and I will give you an update on all of the pieces I have done so far this year, whether they have sold or not, and if so, for how much. And I'll include our little freshly plastered friend here. You know what I mean. You gonna get any traction? You gonna get any love? We shall see. Thank you so much for joining me, my friends. I will see you next time for more Furniture Fables.